Well, thanks for being here.
Not a problem. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're in a beautiful area.
Yeah.
Very random to have a chat, but yeah, we live in the Okanagan and it's a beautiful place to be, and it's a windy day. So I wanted to ask you about some of your experience with using sound on live streams and the recorded videos that you have done over the last few years.
Yeah.
And as soon as I mentioned that, you started laughing because it didn't always go well.
No, I've had a rocky road into this stuff because I have no formal training or anything about sound. I was a drummer, so making noise was good. Being loud was good. That's not the case with sound. So some of the first jobs we got into were using, hand-me-down equipment, which I'm super thankful for, but you don't know that equipment sometimes, so not knowing the limits and what it's capable of or how to use it properly, for example, you kind of fumble through the first bit. The thing that I thought of was the first big multi-million dollar real estate job that we got. It wasn't so much even now the sound, but it was the space that we were shooting in and just like the reflective surfaces. So I didn't know anything about stuff like that. And then going through jobs like this and the pain of trying to fix crappy audio and make it usable, kind of just get more and more frustrated with how things go. And you're like, I need to do this better. I need to figure this out because it just kills all the work you do with the video side of it. So that was kind of how I got my start into learning audio. I still have a lot to learn, and I think that's what's exciting about it, is because it's like you can never stop improving, and there's always new things coming out to help make the process a lot easier.
100%. No, there's and we're just talking about some of the accessibility to some of the higher end tools that once was just, there was no tutorials, there was no price bracket that made sense for people who was trying to just get a little bit better.
Yeah.
And now there's a lot more stuff we can use in real time even. So the space, I 100% understand what you mean about, like, the sound wasn't bad, but the environment that it was in made it bad.
Yeah.
You did more real estate videos after that, though. Were there any more that were similar situations and like you made some adjustments, or how did that go?
Yeah, there's a couple that were kind of different. Anybody that's worked with wireless stuff, now I'm not huge on some of the wireless tech that came out earlier, because if you've ever had like a cell phone near a speaker and you get that kind of like interference sound that comes through when you get a text message, that was bleeding through into the audio, and so it got baked into the track, and then you're trying to like correct and cut out but make it not feel like it gets cut. So stuff like that with going through different rooms, and then you get this interference almost from other signals or whatever. So that was another learning thing of certain frequencies that you don't even use them anymore. So getting rid of that gear, finding gear. Big mastermind seminar that we filmed, same sort of thing. They had their videographer came in, and we had our sound set up, and our sound guy was awesome, by the way. Just I'm gonna put that out there. So we're doing live sound for this, and the videographer's stuff was using the wireless Rode Go transmitter to his camera from his guy on stage. So I started hearing that same sound that I've heard in weddings and real estate stuff, and I'm like, oh no. I'm like looking around, and then I see it on top of his camera. I'm like, see if we can unplug that thing. Killed that, got rid of that weird interference, and it was messing up the whole room. So everybody's picking it up, even our audio is picking up that sound, I think. So it was just one of those cool little pivot moments where that wisdom from the pain of regret and learning could actually help and save that live production that way.
Yeah, it's tough because every single lesson, or maybe not every single one, but most of them are from something going wrong.
Yeah.
And then we have to figure out some way to fix it. But until you actually find out what the problem was, you don't know how to keep that from happening the next time.
Yeah.
And so you end up just start like panic doing things like, okay, if I do this, then it can't possibly go wrong. But then you find out later on that, maybe you didn't even fix the problem, or it was so far overkill that you just made yourself go through a ton of extra effort that you didn't need to do.
Definitely. They say practice makes permanent, so if you're not practicing properly, you can make permanent bad habits, which is also a thing. So it's like, just because I play Mozart terribly doesn't mean Mozart sucks. It just means I need to learn how to play Mozart. So that's my analogy for wanting to learn more in this, because like trying to EQ stuff in post, we didn't have anything Like I had no experience with like how to EQ that. That was always like the electric guitar guys and band and things, but like you could tell good sound because I had the ear for music, but when it came to that, it's just not knowing how to turn what. So it's a lot of me just like playing with things and adjusting things, trying to, I think that sounds good. And then you put it to somebody that has a good ear, like tuned for that stuff, and like, you just read the facial expressions. You're like, okay, I got work to do. Compression, how does it work? When is it too much? Never. It's all never too much. That's good.
It can't be too much.
It's too much. Yeah.
What are you primarily shooting now, and what does your audio workflow look like for that?
Yeah, it's changed. Like I said, with some of the software, like I'm still using Premiere, unfortunately. I haven't been able to force myself into that, get out of it and start DaVinci fully. I know how to use DaVinci and I've used it for some things, but I'm trying to get over that hurdle of what I can do in here is way faster than what I can do here. So a lot of the plugin stuff that comes just stock in Premiere, you have a tab that has all these options. You can tweak it accordingly. And I will be honest, I've probably gotten a little lazier because I see the amount of TikTok videos and things that are like the quality's come down. And so you kind of, do I really put this much time into this stuff? Especially because if some of these clips are just shot on cell phones. It's hard to really put a lot of polish on some of those things, but typically I will lav up something. I use the wireless Go's and I record directly to those and I pull those directly off. So that's kind of my audio source laving people up for weddings or different things. So typically that will be what I'll use for the main, and then I try and have something capture the room depending on the setting. If it's like an interview setting, you want to get more kind of ambient sound. So weddings are good for that too, because you get people's reactions in the background or laughter, and then that gives you a balance that you can kind of fill it out. So aside from that, with plugins, I don't do a whole lot. I try to make sure that I've added some noise reduction depending on how good of a job I did miking up things, if it's got some rustle or not. But you've been showing me some tricks on how to eliminate some of those things, and it's, again, gear. There's so much more stuff that's available, and I'm learning more about those things. And so instead of trying to be cheap, you're kind of like, how do I do the best job with what I have? And you're kind of shifting the mentality of like, this is the quality I want, and I don't want to settle for less, because I'm realizing the steps in that from like not knowing nothing. You could excuse it or kind of play that off, but it's kind of at that point where it's like, no, it's time to invest in this, because I see how much of a difference it makes in a final production and how much life it brings to something that you shot maybe just okay, but like with sound design, with that proper track, it just really jumps out and really captures way more emotion.
Absolutely. No, sound design does, it kind of puts you in the world as soon as you have done even a few things to it. I've always been cautioned though that as soon as you start doing some sound design, you have to do all of it, because like if you go from just the mic that's on you and you're going around and you're doing a vlog, for example, and then maybe you add in like some traffic noise, because like in the background there's a street, but you didn't actually capture that, but you have that sound effect and you layered in. Well, now you start becoming conscious of the other elements that you're missing, so it becomes a slippery slope very quickly.
Oh, definitely.
But it's depending on what you're doing, it might be worth it. It's interesting you mentioned the just like using the plugins that are kind of included, and also like the bar being lowered in terms of like what TikTok videos get a lot of traction, because now the whole game is all about retention and attention. And if you have to do very little work to still get that massive audience, it becomes kind of hard to convince yourself to go through all those extra steps and sometimes hours of extra work just for that 5% better. But something I'm curious about, and maybe this is more of a relevant question to ask you with your line of work, is with all the automatic fixing of things, like phones are getting pretty good at automatically picking up a voice and kind of doing some little adjust. Like they do some magic in the background without us even asking to kind of pick up our voice a little bit more clearly. When you start learning about how some of the more basic and semi-medium advanced audio cleanup tools work, does it seem like too much effort and like you're going back first and then you start getting better? It's like, good enough is good enough.
Yeah, I've definitely changed how I've approached it, because if I could listen to scratch the whole way through was a good example and I wouldn't change it. Now I bring it in, I get it set, and then I'm going to adjust that so I can listen to it as bearable and not listen to the scratch exactly like it was. I would actually treat the scratch track or whatever, and make it more bearable to listen to while I'm chopping things down. That way it's applied to everything, because there's nothing worse than going through cutting a bunch of cuts and then you're like, I only have audio settings on one thing. At least in Premiere it's that way. It doesn't affect everything like an adjustment layer. It's just like that one clip had it and then this one. So if you have all these little tiny cuts, trying to go through, make sure you have everyone selected, and there's that odd one that didn't get it and you're playing it back and you're like, well, that didn't sound right. Or sometimes the opposite happens where it's too easy to play things and you put too much in and you don't really realize because you're in a hurry. And then you're watching it back through, and then like what you try to have noise canceled or like make it sound more like podcast vocal or something, there's an effect that you can put on these things. That filter just doesn't interpret it very well too. So sometimes it'll be like, you'll have like a quieter talking bit and it will like try and lift it unintentionally. And it's like, what was that? And I've heard like just weird, it sounds like somebody else talking almost in the background, and it just picked it up and tried to lift it. So it's kind of been the opposite, where it's actually maybe be a little more thorough and intentional throughout the whole thing, instead of just like, audio, it's done, it's good, and then carry on doing editing. So it's kind of been a double-edged sword of, it's helpful to have the stuff that's really easy, but at the same time, it's kind of helped enable some of the laziness, I think, too, because you can just kind of slap that on, paste it, and then it's done. And then you're like, it's passable, so I can leave it. But then, like I said, doing the sound design, taking it just as much energy as you put into doing your cuts and the timeline of trying to make the story and the scenes flow, putting that same sort of energy into like, okay, how will this audio be compelling or really capture a voice quivering or like the emotion in somebody's voice versus like a plastered podcast filter where
Oh, 100%. Yeah, the blanket filter stuff, you can hear very quickly if someone has like hit like one filter to like an entire track of audio, because like, yeah, you hear like the quiet bits in their voice get over cranked. It gets turned up too much. You hear
there's
the
no
room
dynamic
kind of
range
pumping
in
a
the
little bit.
vocal almost. That's how I look at it. I'm bad for that sometimes, I will say, because it's like putting it out, you watch some of these things and it's just like blaring. I'd rather have it all one kind of level, because I find shows drive me nuts sometimes where you're trying to watch stuff and then it's like action super loud and then you're like dialogue, you're trying to turn it up, so you're just chasing with the volume, and it's like, it really bugs me. So I'm like, my hope is that everything comes out nice and clean and uniform, so it's like one listening level the whole way. It takes you out of the listening experience or watching experience, I think, when you have to mess around with it too much.
It's interesting though, because that's also usually a intentional artistic decision to make the loud scenes loud and the quiet scenes quiet.
Yeah.
Because then you're in your watching environment, you're having a rise and fall of energy to go along with the story. But it's interesting though how that can actually be a distraction sometimes, because like a lot of the times we're not able to really crank it,
well, it
at home or wherever we're watching stuff, like wherever we're consuming content, like we have to have the volume down a bit, and then it becomes annoying to kind of ride that volume level. So I suppose it depends on the intended audience and where they're going to watch something. So like if you're watching a vlog, I would consider the audio mix for that to be completely different story than, say, a short film.
Yeah, exactly.
Or documentary, where someone may be in a captive audience environment where all they're doing is watching your content, and there's going to be dedicated speakers and a screen and everything. And it's not the same as like, oh, here's a video that I just shared, and someone's watching it while they're on their break time or like, sitting in traffic.
No, I 100% agree with that, because it is the time and place, because you do need that contrast for sure. But yeah, I just definitely, I noticed that living in a condo, it's changed stuff too, where ups and downs make a big difference, especially because we don't have like the sound system we used to listen on. So using a little dinky sound bar, you don't get quite the same. So it's like, if you'd probably be a little ashamed of my listening situation.
Well, headphones become a thing then. And like anything that anyone who works in a studio will say is headphones lie to you. Like the mix that you hear in a headphones set sounds different than on a speaker.
Yeah.
Like the music industry was always all about like the car test, and then it became the cell phone test, where like you would listen to your mix in the worst environment. If it sounds good in the worst environment, it'll sound good in any environment.
Oh yeah.
But at some point you start thinking like, how many different places am I going to do my audio mix for my vlog or from this wedding? Like, just get it good enough. And
are people listening to this and watching me like, oh, he must have mixed that in his car? I could tell.
Yeah, like there's a level that someone will care
I still do stuff like that though. Like most of my editing is with headphones. I take them off, I play them through just the cheap monitor speakers just because it's like low budget, low end, nothing. It's just stock. Listen to it through that, see how much gets lost, and then I kind of reassess, does it need to be lifted a bit more, and then put it off, play it on the phone, see how it sounds on the phone, that's another one. And then TV, I used to play that through our theater system and stuff too, so that's another added layer because, yeah, I love that high fidelity sound. It has a lot more, just, I think, value. If you can get the high fidelity, just very clear, crystal clear, man, it's such an experience listening to music and stuff like that. And so, again, listening to what are you listening on? And so I don't always have the luxury like I used to, which is sad, but I think it's worth investing into because it does make a difference when you're in the editing seat or you're doing the post-production. If you're getting into that environment of how you feel the ebbs and flows like we're talking about, that contrast, it really just kind of like pulls you deeper into the story, and I think it just helps you move things along in your flow. At least for me, it does.
No, I absolutely agree with that. Like it makes a big difference when you are immersed in whatever you're watching, even if it's something trivial or just funny.
Yeah.
Or entertaining, if it's a small, short clip or something. If there's actually been care and detail and attention being put into the sound of something, I mean, I'm definitely preaching to the choir, really, whenever I say that kind of thing, because I'm on that team. But I'm always interested to hear, like, where's the point of diminishing returns with different levels? So real quick, if we can switch over to live streaming, because that's a totally different environment, but a lot of the same crossover applies. So
live streaming is a beast in itself. And then the audio with that's almost just as like live streaming camera work, and then there's live streaming like audio work, because they're two separate things, but they work in tandem almost, is how I would explain it. Yeah, having you on that one mastermind seminar, I don't know why I say ceremony, mastermind seminar, that one was like very, very tricky because the room, it's not great. It
was a terrible room.
No,
it was echoey. It was full of
super
noisy
echoey,
people.
even with bodies filled, because sometimes that'll help change it and diffuse some of that. But even the projectors and stuff too, you have just their in-house system, and they're trying to use that, and cell phones, all kinds of things can interfere with what signals you're getting. So I'm lucky I could actually just hand that off to you, because you're more of a specialist than I am in that, for sure. But having that equipment that you used for capture and then noise cancellation within the room like that, I think made that show and the live stream such a viable thing for them, because yeah, the quality of it was definitely unmatched, and definitely they saw the value of that for sure. So when here's a bill for this kind of thing, it's not like, right, they get it because they see the work that goes into the camera side of things. They see the work that the equipment does now because they know what it sounded like in that room. Another one, doing churches and stuff like that for funerals or weddings and different things. It changes depending on what's happening. If it's concerts too, you're fighting like, how do we mix and balance? Because you have like auto-tune working for in-ears and on stage, and then you need like a separate auto-tune for your like stream output, depending on how it is. Some people have like a whole separate DAW and they mix their output channel, and we used to have that set up, but just the lack of people and knowledge to be able to use the system that was built, we kind of had to like pivot and improvise, and it was kind of an ugly process at first. It was definitely a sore spot because you're patching a line right out from the board and using that as your audio out for this live stream.
And it's not,
but it's
mixed
never
for the
gonna
live stream at
sound,
all.
this is mixed for the room, but this isn't mixed for like sitting at home on a TV or whatever. So it's like, definitely you'll lose a lot of all the things that are happening. So trying to get a good blended mix where it sounds full and it sounds like a live event, where you're getting that room reverb instead of like the drums like pop, pop, and it's like, sounds too much like a weird trigger and not like a drum going psh, psh. So those are good examples of live stream stuff, trying to blend those tracks so you don't have like drums bleeding through, or like it's all vocals and then there's a band somewhere back there, but this layers of mix that you're trying to like calibrate. And what was so tricky about that is like, you're listening in the room okay, the mix sounds good, but that mix changes every time a band members and different groups change. So you have to constantly be shifting the mix to fit what's happening in the room every time because that system, versus giving the control of like you'd have a mix here and a mix here, and that would be just way more simplistic. And I still think we should go back to that, but again, if somebody else built the system for you, there's tricks and training that you might not have that you need to operate and use that gear the way it should be used to get that kind of quality. I think live stream stuff too, they've evolved a lot. Instead of trying to be this polished studio sound to now going to like a live concert sort of sound where you get that room reverb, you get the decay. I think it's definitely shifted in that direction where you're not trying to make it sound polished in the sense of like a polished studio product versus embrace the room, embrace the people, get crowd mics to help lift the atmosphere in the room, and it really translates through to your final live stream product.
Oh, the crowd mics are kind of like adding reverb onto a vocalist in a recording studio. Like it just kind of sweetens a lot of things. It creates a bit of space, takes you out of that ISO booth and puts you in a space. And I 100% agree with like the live stream aspect. As soon as you add a room mic, you feel a bit more like you're there. It's a little bit more believable that this is an actual live event happening and not just like, why does everything sound so like locked in and isolated? But it's because you're missing that room space itself.
Yeah, it's kind of like your blanket to fall back on. Trying to blend everything in. Sometimes there's a caveat to that where you can lift those mics, but if the people in your front rows near those mics aren't really good at singing, can be kind of a challenge to then you're, okay, well, you want that, but you don't want that. So selective mixing, I think, for those. And yeah, we've had some funny ones because like if you don't turn them off and you start the live stream, you want people to, usually they tune in and have it set and be like, okay, it's working, the stream's going. But if you have people on the soundboard and things that don't maybe mute that crowd mic, you get people just sitting up there talking and that's bleeding through, and it's just kind of funny. Some of the things you'd be like, hey, you guys be careful if you're in the front row because these mics are live.
So that's actually a funny thing to bring up there because yes, I forget when it started, but I became consciously aware of whenever I was on some kind of like a live stream event, whenever I had room mics, is I kind of make a mental note of how close they were to seats. I try to make it like an average mess of the whole room. So that mastermind event that you just brought up, we had a room mic, but I intentionally threw it pretty high up. So you couldn't really pick up a single conversation. You can't be hearing like noise. 6 or 7 conversations all at once if you tuned in early or late and the stream is still going. Yeah. Because on one side you want to keep people's conversations private, and the other side you want people online to know that there's activity in the room. Because maybe you can't see it on camera because you're pointing at the stage and no one's up there yet. Yeah. But you still want to hear something.
Same thing, yeah. So you want to hear that, but if like so-and-so comes up and be like, oh, how's your mom doing? Or like, it's kind of like, it'll pick that up because they are a lot more directional, and so not the same option of up and above because it's a huge room. But yeah, even in that seminar, like I remember too, trying to remind people that they're laved up and then they go to leave and then they start talking shit about someone or just like, oh, that deal was, like it's one of those things. We've had some funny, maybe behind the scenes footage. One tour I was doing for a real estate agent, and they're like, oh, I just got to go to the bathroom for a second. Right? They forget they're mic'd up and, taking a whiz, and you hear that coming through. You're like, I don't think he wants this in post, but.
Yeah, that's where not having an audio operator really becomes obvious. Like if everything goes fine and smooth, it's all great. But as soon as that one thing happens, it's like, oh man, like that's why the running joke is like, oh, like you're mic'd up. Oh, don't go to the bathroom now. Like, because it's happened enough times, and it's so weird. People develop amnesia as soon as you mic them up.
It is, because they walk off with it. I've forgotten too, and I'm like, oh, I'm trying to like chase somebody down before they leave, get the lab back, because it's like put on them. So it's obviously a good job laving them up, but yeah, it's a funny surprise when you're going through editing and you're trying to track through and find the takes that are usable, the ones you wanted, and you get this like, what is that? Then it kind of dawns on you. You're like, oh man, didn't even realize because you're busy tweaking settings or doing some B-roll or something.
What would be a takeaway that you could maybe give to someone who's starting out and they're going to be shooting some smaller videos with just like a 1-2 person team, and there's going to be some dialogue. Maybe there's even like some performances, such as like musical or anything like that. What kind of things did you learn the hard way, shall we say, that that maybe someone else could learn, could gain wisdom from?
I think one of the biggest, most important things, now this could be a dangerous slope, and so don't hear me wrong, but getting gear that is good. Don't have to buy the top end stuff right out of the gate, but you know, spend some money on the gear. It's kind of like, I think of the hunting analogy. If you spend $1,000 on your gun, you should at least spend $1,000 on your scope. That's kind of like on par, because if you can't see this stuff, how are you supposed to make a good shot? So you're spending all this money on your camera gear, cheap out on audio, and you're just like, well, I got a recorder, I'll just plug this lav in. It's gonna hurt you more than it's gonna help you. And the less things you have to deal with trying to do the editing, usually that's a condensed time, or you're under a lot of stress to try and reach that deadline, or you know, it just robs you of that workflow when you have bad audio and you're trying now to salvage something. It takes way more energy, and it just is almost demoralizing. And then I think you lose your critical objectiveness when you're doing the rest of your edits. So trying to make sure you can spend some good money into some gear, but then learning the gear beforehand. So like, don't just take this brand new thing, go out and shoot a wedding. Like, practice doing some stuff around the house or with wife or girlfriend or somebody. Just miking them up. That's another thing too. Nobody really taught me that. I just kind of like fumbled through it and try not to be awkward about doing it. And it's like, it can be really awkward if you've never done it. So trying to put yourself in the position of like doing it so you feel a lot more confident when you go to mic somebody up. So that's another one. The last thing I would say is a big help for me with community. Not being too proud to ask for help or ask for just like how people do things. Some people can be very, you know, closed off with their process, and that's fine. But I think more often than not, people are excited to kind of share what they do, especially when you want to see how they do things. You want to understand where they're coming from and what they've learned. That will save you, I think, leaps and bounds. You're still going to have some learnings, but that's, I think, how most people do learn, is by stumbling through things and finding it out for themselves. So the more time you have in practice, I think the better. The old saying of hard work will outbeat talent when talent fails to work hard. And it's like the best way I can kind of encapsulate. Yeah, you can work hard and you will learn some stuff along the way, and you'll beat people that I think just take it easy and casually scroll through it. But at some point you'll gain those skills where you can just casually go through it and somebody else is trying to be the next up and comer.
I could never have predicted the number of things I had learned from just trying stuff with gear that I thought that I already knew.
Yeah.
I thought I knew how it worked. I did a quick test, something unexpected happened, and the number of times I felt relief, like, oh, I'm so glad that didn't happen when it counted. It's shocking. So yeah, 100% practice with your gear, try it out. Do it to where you're almost able to do it without even thinking.
Yeah.
And then there's just no stress when you're doing it out in the field or on a job or in front of a client or in a less than ideal situation, sometimes weather related, sometimes timing related, sometimes stress and sleep related.
It helps you be so much more flexible too. If you've tried different things, you're way more adaptable. When something doesn't go right, you can actually pivot and you're like, oh, well, I've done this before. And you can pull from that experience and help sometimes save the day. So it's kind of like, it's always good to be creative. And I think taking that ingenuity into your gear, into how to use things maybe in a way they weren't meant to. Sometimes you can find these really cool little hacks. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here on this beautiful morning in this awesome area of the city.
Thank you.